The Babylon Project was our last best hope for Scott. A self-contained podcast, 1 hour long, located on the internet. A place of fun and discussion for Babylon 5 fans everywhere. A shining beacon in cyberspace, all alone in the night. It was the dawn of the 20th anniversary of Babylon 5, the year the Great War to free Bab 5 came upon us all. This is the story of the last of the Babylon podcasts. The year is 2014. The name of the place is the Babylon Project Podcast.
This is Maggie Egan, your ISN news anchor, and you're listening to the Babylon Project podcast. Thanks for listening.
Hi there, Babylon 5 fans. Here we are again for another exciting episode of the Babylon Project podcast. How are you doing tonight, Jim?
Very well. And looking forward to talking about TKO.
TKO, yeah. Or as it could be subtitled, Rocky Meets Bloodsport.
Oh, yeah.
If you remember the old Van Damme movie.
Yes, I
actually, you
definitely
used to run movies, theater, I believe you said once.
Yes.
Was that one of the ones that you had seen from that perspective, meaning Bloodsport?
Bloodsport, yes. Now, if I'm not mistaken, is that the one with David Carradine?
Oh, my.
Is David
don't remember, but we're podcasting.
There was a David Carradine played a character named Ankar Moore, or something like that. I think that's the same.
Bloodsport, 1998. Frank Dux, full cast: Jean-Claude Van Damme, Donald Gibb, Leah Ayres.
No, I've got the wrong movie then.
Nope.
No.
Though, there is a connection to Bloodsport here. Just in the series itself. What's the fighting event called?
The fighting event is called, yes, the Mutari.
The Mutari are the fighters. The Mutai is the actual event.
Oh, yes.
Right?
The Mutai, yes.
In Bloodsport, the character that Van Damme, our Frank Dux, is going up against is a martial artist who's trained in a form of Thai boxing, Muay Thai. Muay Thai, style Van Damme used in Bloodsport. That was just one of those interesting little thread connections that I thought, and of course, Bloodsport itself, the movie's all about him going into an event that's essentially the Muay Thai. And he has to overcome a lot of antagonism against Anglos to get into it.
Yeah. Doesn't Muay Thai mean trial of blood?
I believe so.
So, yeah. It would be hard for me to accept that JMS didn't do that intentionally.
Yeah. If you guys, if any of you youngsters listening want a good, what's the best word I can call it? Testosterone movie. Yeah, that's it.
Blood
and guts. And the three slow motion flicks of Van Damme's roundhouse kick.
Oh, yeah, he had a great one, too.
Okay. I suppose before we drift off on these sidetracks, it would probably be a good idea for you to tell us what happens in this episode, right, Jim?
You bet. Let's get on with it.
All yours.
Archive. Access initiated.
In the opening scenes of TKO, a transport arrives on Babylon 5. Among the passengers departing from the transport are Walker Smith, a friend of Garibaldi's, and Rabbi Yassel Kozlov, a friend of the Ivanova family. While Garibaldi is in the process of arresting 2 perpetrators involved in a drug deal, Smith intercepts one of the perps in the process of attacking Garibaldi from behind. We later learn that Smith is a former prizefighter who was thrown out of the fight game after he was falsely accused of taking performance-enhancing drugs. Smith has come to Babylon 5 to participate in the Muay, a brutal ritualistic fight that Garibaldi describes as a meat grinder. Despite Garibaldi's attempt to keep his friend from participating in the dangerous game, Smith approaches the Mutado, the person who presides over the tournament. Smith is told that humans are too weak and are not worthy to participate in the Muay and is sent away. Smith is then approached by Caliban, a former Mutari who was defeated by the opponent that Smith wants to face. Caliban explains that if Smith wants to fight in the Muay, he must follow the proper protocol and do it with respect. Garibaldi and Smith attend the Muay match. They watch Gior, the Shorin or the champion of the Muay, easily defeat his opponent. When the Mutado calls for a challenge from a worthy opponent, Smith steps up and challenges Gior. Having issued his challenge with respect in the proper way, the Mutado will allow the match to take place in 3 days' time. After training under the watchful eyes of Garibaldi and Caliban, Smith faces Gior in the ring. After a long toe-to-toe battle, both fighters go down exhausted and unable to continue. The crowd begins chanting Gior's name, but Gior stops them and leads them in a chant for Smith. Later, as Smith is leaving the station, he is approached by Gior and the Mutado, who informs Smith that humans may now enter the Muay as brothers. The second plot is an extension of Born to the Purple, the episode in which Ivanova briefly visits with her estranged father as he lay dying in the hospital. While reading in her quarters, Ivanova receives a visit from Rabbi Kozlov, a longtime friend of Ivanova's family. He has made the trip from Earth to help Ivanova with the loss of her father. While Ivanova has convinced herself that she is not having problems, Kozlov tells her that she needs to participate in the Shiva ritual, in which friends and family gather for a meal, stories, and offer prayers to the deceased. When Kozlov offers to make the arrangements for the gathering, Ivanova claims that her duties will not permit her the time for it. Kozlov approaches Sinclair, who grants Ivanova whatever time she needs. When Ivanova learns that Kozlov has approached the commander, she gets upset. As Kozlov is leaving the station, Ivanova catches up with him before he can leave to say goodbye and to apologize for her behavior. She then remembers the last encounter with her father and calls him back and asks him to help her sit Shiva. He does, and Ivanova comes to terms with her feelings and can move on.
Initiating plot analysis.
Thank you, Jim. That was a good one. Now we can get back on. Now we can get back onto the subject.
We sure can. So the ship that arrives, carrying Smith and Rabbi Kozlov, is called the White Star.
Of course. I'm not the only one who noticed that, huh?
No, I caught that right away, and I did do a double take. And I have to wonder, did JMS maybe not think of calling the ships in the future that were going to be in the future the White Star fleet?
I have no idea. That it could have just been one of those odd coincidences. All I will say is that this white star is not the white stars that could chew up and spit out a Star Destroyer for lunch.
Oh, yeah. You bet. So, yeah, they arrive on the White Star.
And as you said, Mr. Smith, Walker Smith, and Rabbi Kozlov were traveling together. And those two roles in this were played by Greg McKinney as Walker Smith and the very well-known, at least especially on the Broadway series, Theodore Bickel, and I'm sure I did not pronounce that right. I don't know if it's Bickel or Bickel.
Yeah, it would be, I've heard it pronounced Theo Bickel.
Theo Bickel? Yeah. I'll stand corrected and go with that then. I'll yield to your... I'll yield to the superior intellect.
Well, the only reason I know that is because I remember watching a show a long time ago where it was a show called What's My Line? And he was on that show.
Okay.
So
Theodore Bickel.
Yeah, that's going back some, you know.
Well, go ahead. What do you know about Theodore Bickel?
Well, he was Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. That's probably his best known role. And really, I don't know a whole lot more except that he plays Russians and Jews a lot, and he's considered to be a very well-respected actor.
He was also Zoltan on My Fair Lady. He was the German commander on African Queen. And for me, where I think I know the name most was playing Von Trapp in Sound of Music, the original. He defined the character on the original Broadway. So
okay,
you notice, and we've said this before. There's a tendency to pull in these really serious Broadway actors with some major chops. For the craft, and he was definitely one of those.
Yes. There's a great many really great actors. In our next episode, we'll have another great one coming up. One of my favorites.
Yeah, and his traveling partner Walker Smith was played by Gregory McKinney.
Yeah, who I learned today in my research that he died.
Yeah, brain aneurysm.
Yeah, some interesting parallels there. He was called Walker Smith,
the character,
which was Sugar Ray Robinson's actual name.
And they died on the same day.
And
did you?
Yeah, the same day. And one was one was in 1989, and the other one was 1998. Yeah, I read that somewhere too. So it's really too bad. The guy wasn't very old. He was a decent actor. He had a career in the military. Were you aware of that?
Military or police?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So he wasn't that far off from, as far as being trained to fight, he was.
Oh, yeah. He was, I'm recalling it right now. He was part of the Presidential Honor Guard. Yeah. He served in the Air Force Presidential Honor Guard.
Oh, wow.
And he had a career in law enforcement before becoming an actor. So he was a fighter.
Okay. And speaking of fighters, other cast members for this included Sun TKO as the Mutado, who looks completely different out of makeup. Now, this gentleman has a bit of a reputation. If you look at his casting credits, he's been around forever. He goes all the way back to I Spy and the Wild Wild West. But most of us would know him as Fa-Zhou, Mulan's father, on Mulan.
His other favorite role of mine was in a movie called Final Countdown.
Oh, awesome movie, yes.
Yeah, he was the Japanese pilot they shot down and rescued. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. That is an awesome movie. It's an oldie, and if you haven't seen it, folks, time travel flick done right.
And if you get a good copy with good extra features on it, definitely watch the extra features, because those guys that flew those planes, they were the real stuff. They were the real deal.
Yes, this should be at the top of your list for classic sci-fi movies.
Yes, most definitely.
I gotta say, it was a total wipeout, but F-14s against Japanese Zeros, oh gosh, it was just, you knew what was going to happen, but but you're just sitting there watching it, going, yeah.
Yeah, well, let's not spoil it, okay? Watch
yeah.
it.
Oh, this isn't, folks, and this wouldn't be considered as, I mean, that's inevitable.
Yeah.
Who else needs to be mentioned in this? Don Stroud. Don Stroud was Caliban.
Yes.
Another very long-standing character actor, great actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was on a couple of episodes of Babylon 5.
Yeah. Not only as Caliban, but we never completely see his face. I guess this is where we see more of his face than his other role, because in his other role he was a Narn.
Right.
That will be an episode, season 2 or season 3.
Well, I'm not sure at this point.
I know the episode name, but I'd have to look up which. So,
well, actually, no. He played a character named Boggs.
Was he Boggs?
He was Boggs.
Yes, he was. Okay.
Yes, in Ceremonies of Light and Dark.
You are very correct. I got that mixed up. The other person that I probably should mention is James Jude Courtney, who played Gior.
He's a stuntman and an actor.
Uh-huh. And that's the one that I was thinking of playing the Narn, by the way.
Okay.
Sick Transit Veer.
I believe you're right. Yeah. Yeah, I believe you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so anyway, we got Smith and Rabbi Kozlov getting off of the transport.
Right.
Right away, we get some action. Garibaldi catches a couple of guys bringing down a dope deal for something called slappers, which I had no idea what it was.
Skin tabs that inject medicine.
Yeah, you slap them on the skin. And they were from MedLab. So anyway, Garibaldi takes these two guys down and then turns his back on these two guys to call for backup.
Yep. And one of them pulls a knife and is going after Garibaldi, and Walker takes him down one punch.
Now, do we have a bit of a plot hole here? I'm sorry, I cannot picture Garibaldi being that careless.
Considering that he went into this whole encounter fists swinging the way he did, in a lot of ways, this was, I hate to say it, but it was one of the weaker episodes of the season.
Well, yeah, in some ways.
In some ways, especially along that A story.
Yeah, but we do get a few important points that we'll cover along the way.
Uh-huh. Well, we get one of them right here. If you want a little bit of foreshadowing, what's the first words out of Walker Smith's mouth to Garibaldi?
Well, he wonders why he's drinking water instead of something a little
I mean,
harder.
when they first meet at that crime scene, he tells him, you better learn to watch your back.
Yeah,
Michael better take that advice, huh?
Yes. I don't think we need to spoil that, though.
Well, we're spoiler friendly here.
I know, but
good. It's still good
advice. It's not that long of a wait.
So anyway, obviously they know each other.
Yes, and they do a little bit of catching up.
Yep.
And we find out that Walker was kind of forced out of the fight game. He was a contender on his way to the top, and probably would have made it, except that he refused to take a dive.
Yeah, the mob apparently is going strong still.
Yeah. But the mob in the future, that's
Yeah, no change there. They're still involved in boxing, and he got railroaded out and framed because he wouldn't take that fall.
at least we know he's an honorable person.
Mhm.
But now he wants to get back into the fight game,
which is why he's here. Now we're going to get more on.
Yeah.
We're going to get more on that. Let's go ahead and the same way the show interweaves, and there's a lot of interweaving back and forth in this story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it makes sense because in a lot of ways, what he's going to have to do is come to terms with himself. It seems that's what Rabbi Kozlov is here to, probably not by original intent, but ultimate intent with Susan Ivanova as well, because he's there to bring her legacy from
Yes.
Andrei Ivanov.
Oh yeah, and not only that, but comfort and closure.
Mm-hmm. Now, okay, one thing I've got to know: the opening scene with Susan.
Mm-hmm.
Ivanova is sitting there laughing her keister off, reading a book by Harlan Ellison,
Yes.
the creative consultant
Yes.
for the show.
And you know what? When I first saw this show, I busted my butt trying to find this book.
Yeah, the book isn't real.
I didn't know anything about the Lurker's Guide, and this wasn't really that long ago. I think I've had the complete series now for about 4 years.
Right.
And I really tried to find this book because, I thought it was something I wanted to read. And
It probably is something you're going to want to
discovered-
read if Harlan ever finishes writing it.
Well, yeah. It's yet to be written. But, yeah.
It's the working title for his memoirs.
Yes. As an aside note, a very brief aside note, in case you aren't aware, a couple of weeks ago, as of the recording date today, Harlan Ellison did suffer a stroke. Were you aware
I
of
was
this?
aware of that. I was not aware of any of the details behind it.
Okay, well, what I've heard is that almost right away, they must have gotten to him plenty early. He is having some difficulty with the right side of his body, but he's just as mean as he ever was.
Okay.
And he still has his sense of humor, and he's talking a mile a minute and can't wait to get back to
Well,
work.
that's good. That's good to hear.
So apparently he is on the road to recovery, but in any case, I'm sure, Raul, you'll join me in wishing Harlan Ellison a very speedy recovery and get back to work.
Back to work. Yep.
Yes.
There is a side note also for me to add regarding the book Ivanova's reading. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Harlan took it's a fake book, obviously, with just the cover.
Oh, yeah.
He'd run around with the book just to play with people's minds, and get them scrambling to try to find the book.
Well, it worked in my case.
So yes, he's Kozlov's there to bring her legacy, and that's when he finds out that she has still not sat Shiva for her father's passing, which is a
Right.
Jewish custom.
It is. And there seems to be rules that can change with the circumstances.
Right.
As far as Shiva is concerned.
Normally, it's done over 7 days. Friends and family can come in and comfort, and they celebrate the life and passing of the deceased. It doesn't
There's
have to
also
be 7
involved-
days, though. But go ahead.
Right. And there's also involved, my understanding, a tearing of clothing.
It can be shortened 3 days or even less, depending on how long after it has been that the person has passed, and
Mm-hmm.
also based on the location and who's around it, because it's the friends and family coming in if you're a place where there's not as many people.
Yeah. So why hasn't Susan done her duty in sitting Shiva?
Well, I have had a note electronic note sitting on my computer screen since the episode Born to the Purple where Andrei Ivanov passed.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, remember question of whether Susan had forgiven her father or not when they sit Shiva. That has a whole lot to do with it, I think.
Yeah, she obviously, from her monologue, has not come to terms with that.
No. She is not happy about the situation with her father at all. And
No.
she doesn't take well to any sort of meddling. In fact, Sinclair wasn't even aware that her father had died.
Right. You know, I really don't see what Rabbi Kozlov was doing as meddling myself.
Yeah.
He was doing
his job, both as a rabbi and as, I mean, not necessarily a blood uncle, but by family closeness and tradition, an uncle. So he was doing his job both as a rabbi and as family.
Well, he followed what Susan had told him, which was very simply she did not have time. Her duties wouldn't allow her the time to do what she needed to do.
Right.
So
check with the commander.
The rabbi went to her commander and said, "Can she have the time to do this?"
And Sinclair is very supportive of Uncle Yoso or Rabbi Kozlov, whichever role he was functioning in at the time. He was very supportive of his, quote, meddling.
Well, he wouldn't survive on Babylon 5 very long if he didn't have an open mind and was willing to accept the traditions of others.
Yep. And, you know, I got to say something.
Mm-hmm.
He was wearing a fashion item in this episode that I had not seen, at least not that I can remember, I had not seen yet on Babylon 5, and I don't think I've seen it following. He had a necktie on. If you notice, most men's shirts tend to be collar free on that show.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't just mean uniform, I mean casual or even dress shirts. So
that's
bit
true.
of an anachronism there, and you know, it could just be, you know, tradition.
Okay. Tell you what, Raul, promise me you're not going to sing anymore on the show.
You know, there's a reason I'm a sound man that I used to explain to people. And that is, it put me further away from any open
from the
mic.
Microphone.
Yeah. than anyone else involved with a production.
If there's any singing to be done, I'll do it.
Yep.
Okay. So anyway, in the meantime, if we can get back to our other story.
And, you know, and we were just talking about respect that Sinclair had. I think respect is a good spot to come back into the other story.
Yes. Which Walker Smith didn't display any.
Nope.
When he walked in and demanded from the Mutado that he be allowed to participate in the Mutai.
After calling the Mutado E.T.
Yes.
Yeah.
Completely wrong approach here.
Yep, and Garibaldi knew who he was talking to.
Oh, yeah.
So,
well, Garibaldi's on the station. He knows what's going on. He just kind of let him stumble forward.
Mm-hmm.
So
at this point, it's like, why aren't humans allowed in the Mutai?
The way I kind of took it is that they felt that humans were not strong enough probably in physical strength, and maybe not strong enough in character to participate.
I would absolutely have to disagree, not with you, but with the principal. You know, on the physical side, I mean, there's been nothing we've seen to indicate, you know, a physical disparity between, you know, a physical frailty between humans and the other races. On the other end, yeah.
But I think in general, when we think about in science fiction, when we think about alien races, we think about them being stronger, just naturally. At least I know I do. You know, the Vulcans are stronger than humans in Star Trek.
Yeah, and I know what you're talking about. It's one of those sci-fi tropes.
Yeah, and the humans seem to have more on the clever thinking side as opposed to the physical strength.
Right. But that's not been really the case so much in BAB 5. I mean, from a physical stand-up and fight perspective, I would argue that there's not that much difference between the Narn and Centauri and humans as far as physical capability.
See, and I have to wonder
the
about
Narn
that.
are a little more aggressive, but from what we see, think about what you see through the show. They hold up on a 1-to-1 basis pretty fairly.
Yeah.
Minbari are physically tougher. Yeah, there's a little more. If the Narn have any advantage, I would say it's all in their military training. They're a very militaristic.
Oh yeah.
Race.
Well, they had to be. They had to be to fight off the Centauri.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Minbari are physically tougher. I mean, we saw that with Soul Hunter.
Yeah, but they are also just. They all seem to be very highly trained in whatever their martial art is.
Right, but you really don't get. I just really haven't gotten that kind of meme going through the series the way it does. I mean, heck, even the Drazi, Susan gives as good as she takes.
Oh yeah.
We'll see that early in the second season, which is just an absolutely hilarious episode with the red and blue. I'm sorry, red and purple.
Yeah.
I know, the red and blue. Wrong show. Green
and purple and green.
Purple and green, yes. Red and blue is a animated series.
Yeah, but at any rate, Walker decides that he's going to take a swing at the Mutado and gets put in his place
very quickly by a 90-year-old man.
And what is so neat about that is that it was one move, and that was it. It wasn't this whole elaborate martial arts display that you see in a lot of other shows. He put him down most
realistically,
efficiently.
If you want to be honest about it, realistically.
Absolutely.
And he used Smith's momentum and strength against him.
Yes.
I really like that. And yeah, Smith definitely has too much mouth.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the tradition, though, for boxers. A la Ali.
Yeah.
You know, you remember?
Of course.
Come on, Gorilla, we're going to Manila.
But he had it as an art form. It really was an art form.
Well,
with him. He's not Smith's not exactly happy with Michael. His pride definitely took a, shall we say, a bit of a beating.
Yeah, well, you know, that happens a lot when you have an "I told you so" moment.
Yep.
But you know, Garibaldi's been against Smith going into this from the beginning. I mean, Garibaldi describes this competition as a meat grinder.
Mm-hmm. A la Bloodsport, the movie.
And so it would be, you know, he thinks that Smith is making a big mistake in getting involved in this.
Yeah. And I guess it's while all this is happening, it seems back on the other side of things that we see your favorite table at the Fresh Air.
Yes, the same one. And Susan is not real happy about the rabbi approaching Sinclair.
No.
I think Susan wanted to keep this secret because she is not the kind of person that would take sympathy and pity very well at all.
Oh, good heavens, no. She would simply wrap herself around her Russian culture there in that regard. So absolutely.
and the thing of it is, it would eat at her as time went on.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually this could quite possibly be quite damaging for her.
Yeah. I mean, the real truth is both Sinclair and the rabbi are right, but
Yes.
it's one of those things that she's going to have to eventually learn for herself.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that if you look at this in a series of days, those two events more or less in day one, and we pick up with Garibaldi and Smith.
And Smith is approached by a gentleman named Caliban,
Mm-hmm.
who offers to help Smith gain entrance to the Mutai.
The right way. At least
Yes,
one of the
exactly.
alternative right ways, because Smith pretty much killed that option.
Why? What's the deal with Caliban? Why does he feel like he should get involved here?
That's what I was wondering at the time as well, and we'll get our answer. We'll definitely get our answer shortly, because you and I aren't the only person asking that question. But getting us to that, it turns out that Smith was able to pull tickets to one of the fights at the
Yeah,
Mutai.
he got a pair of tickets.
So he convinces Garibaldi to go with him.
And it's kind of false pretenses. We're just going to watch.
Yeah. And I noticed Centauri and Narn are in the audience. The way it was kind of... Yeah, see, that's one of the pieces that really just rubbed me. It's like, okay, Centauri and Narn, though I guess going in, looking forward a moment, I really didn't see either of those in the training.
No, you're right.
So, and I think, I'm pretty sure I saw at least one or two humans in the first fight as part of the audience, just not as contestants.
Wasn't there a Drazi
Fighter, yes.
also? And well, not only a fighter, but
there were Drazi, plenty of Drazi in the audience.
Yeah, there were multiple races in the audience. However, not one single Minbari.
Nope, not even Warrior Cast.
No. And I don't think you would see a Minbari at an event like this.
And going back to our original question, so of the major races, like I said, we did have Narn and we did have Centauri in the audience, and that would certainly fit with either of their cultures. We don't see them as contestants, so it may just be a matter of that being something that is really focused around the league. It's something that is theirs, and they guard it rather jealously.
Right. Well, who would want to fight Gior anyway?
Not the way he tore that guy apart.
I sure would not want to get in the ring with that guy.
Mm-hmm. And as my notes say, after the fight, Smith's challenge sort of reminds me of a Van Damme movie.
That was very well played by him. He waited for his time, and then he stepped into the ring and made his challenge.
With respect.
Yes.
And, of course, it wouldn't be much of a story if the Shorin Dior didn't take him up on the challenge, if he didn't accept the challenge.
Well, I'm sure that Gior thought he was going to have another easy win, perhaps easier than all the rest of them.
Or, a chance to make a point. A chance to make a point to the humans.
And, is it at this point that we see some anti-human sentiment?
In the audience, the go away.
Yeah.
Some of the go away, leave us alone kind of comments. Don't push yourself in on our... Yeah, who are you to push in to our things?
Right. Did you happen to think at all, as I did, that seemed a lot like Home Guard kind of thinking, only in reverse?
No, I didn't. That's a really good thought, though, Jim.
Yeah. To me, that's the way it seemed, is that we have, we have humans who want aliens off of Earth, and whether it's a reciprocal kind of a feeling or not, we have some prejudice against humans also.
Yeah, it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it goes both ways. And, thinking of it from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. We get back to the so-called B story. I think both of these stories are A stories, actually.
Yeah, in a way, especially with what I'll go with that, especially in the context of what Ivanova's story closes. So yes, we get Andre's legacy to her, the samovar.
Yeah, and I had no idea what that was. It looked like a huge urn when he gave it to her, so I looked it up.
It is extremely important part of Russian heritage.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the hot water heater.
Yeah, for tea. Primarily for tea.
Yeah. Well,
but for any sort of hot water. It
seemed to me, for what I've read, that's where the hot water is kept. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, this was so important that I read that the bellows were invented to keep the fire going in a samovar. Wow.
I know the way Straczynski describes it, and he's Belarus, so some of it, he's got some firsthand experience in this, and it's basically, for the Russians, the family hearth, almost, on one level.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's extremely important. And now,
there's fights over who inherits the samovar.
And the one now for her family belongs to Susan, which basically makes her the head of the family.
And it goes back to the days of the czars. Yeah. So it's very significant relic of the family.
So she kind of breaks down a little bit and apologizes for her behavior. Mm-hmm. The rabbi he kind of apologizes a little bit for meddling, so-called meddling.
But here's where
I still don't think it was.
But this is where we get to the heart of the problem. It's forgiveness.
Yeah. And that's where Susan lets him know that she just has not forgiven him and then she details what she feels has been done to her.
Uh-huh.
That she was basically just ignored by her father after her mother died.
Right.
She didn't feel important to him, and she didn't feel like she counted.
Yeah, which is, especially for her and her background and her circumstances, a hard thing to deal with.
Well, yeah, and it also makes it very understandable why she has withdrawn into herself and hasn't shared her grief with anybody.
Yeah, and her whole personal life. Not just her grief, hasn't shared much of anything.
And the funny thing is, is if you recall, Garibaldi knows this. Garibaldi knows all about this.
Mm-hmm.
But he's very conveniently kept out of that storyline.
Yeah, that's a real interesting thought there, too.
Yeah, because I think if Garibaldi had been involved, Sinclair and him and most likely Franklin would have ganged up on her.
Mm-hmm.
And that wouldn't have been a pretty
he wouldn't have pulled Franklin in, I don't think. But he definitely it might have eventually gotten out, but
I think if you ganged up on Susan Ivanova and backed her into a corner, I don't think that would be a very pretty sight.
No. Garibaldi's probably the only one who could try and get away with it, but no, you're absolutely right.
So anyway, back to the other story, we've got
the training montage.
Caliban is doing the training, and that's where we learn that Caliban cares because his fighting career was basically ended by Gior.
Yeah, that's pretty much where it is. And Garibaldi finally asked him, do you think he really even has a chance here? I like Caliban's answer. He'll fight bravely.
Well, yeah, obviously the guy, what has Smith have to lose?
Mm-hmm.
He has nothing left to lose.
No.
You know, I would imagine that he would gain prestige just walking into the ring.
Yeah, and that's the main reason why he's doing it. He's doing it to get himself to force them to accept him back into the fight circuit,
Right.
on the Earth and the Earth's colonies.
You made a note here that says some of the music reminded you of Rocky.
At the training, just some of the kind of fanfare stuff.
See, I kind of missed that. The music didn't strike me as being something that stood. It just didn't stand out to me.
No, it didn't really stand out. You know, and I'm not talking about the I'm not talking about the big well-known da 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 da. See, I'm not singing though. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I just some of the incidental music and some of the training montage. It's kind of got a little bit of that feel, I thought.
I'll have to go back and listen to that.
But then we switch back, and it keeps popping back and forth while Smith and Ivanova are both fighting their inner struggles here. It keeps flipping back and forth. So
yeah, and you have to think about it too, because it is not obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Because Smith's fight is definitely external, and Ivanova's fight is internal.
Is Smith's fight really external? Is the real fight? And we'll hold on to this question. Don't answer it now.
Mm-hmm.
Is his real fight external or internal? Is his real fight against Gior the Shorin, or is it really against himself? Keep that in mind. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Susan's fight is absolutely internal, and we see that when Uncle Yossel is preparing to leave. And I love that. May God keep you in his thoughts, that traditional Jewish blessing.
Well, he's pretty well made up his mind that he's done everything he can do. He's offered to help her sit Shiva. He's offered to give her comfort, and she's refused, so it's time for him to go home.
Right. And as he's finally walking away, and I think it's that closing blessing from him that really triggers it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the comment, his closing comment of how proud Andre was of her.
Mm-hmm.
We get that flashback to his final words.
Right. And his very last words were, forgive me.
Uh-huh.
And of course, Susan didn't answer him before he passed.
Nope.
And she knows this.
But she answers now.
And she calls Kozlov back and asks him to help her do her duty to her family.
Yep. And Sinclair very graciously not only grants her the leave for it, but he shows an amazing understanding, and he also shows that he understands the Jewish customs as well, and intends to be there for her.
Oh yeah.
And so we get this intercut as the two struggles resolve. We get this intercut between the fight and Shiva.
Yep.
It was just a really interesting contrast. It doesn't make sense until you think of it as both of them fighting a particular struggle.
Right.
And like I've said before, that fight is sort of a mix of Rocky and Bloodsport.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, just a note, Susan's prayer is a translation of the Jewish prayer.
Oh, yeah.
So Straczynski paid an incredible amount of respect to Jewish custom and Jewish practice in this. And
yeah. Well, how can you not? It's thousands of years old.
You'd be surprised at what people, he didn't Hollywoodize it. He kept a level of respect that, It's just something you don't see a lot.
Well, I think Straczynski has proved himself that he's not ignorant, and that he wanted this show to be authentic and thoughtful, and there was more to it than making money.
Absolutely, absolutely, which is probably my biggest overused word in this podcast, but it's what you say is very true. You know, and he approached the show as a science fiction fan, and for him, that authenticity is really what mattered and what was important.
Well, that's one of the things that makes this show so special, is that it is personal. It's not commercial.
Yeah, that's that's part of the magic of the show, I think.
Yeah, this show sold itself. It didn't need anybody to do it for it. But at any rate...
Anyway, back to the Rocky Apollo moment.
Yeah, wasn't that something? Toe-to-toe.
Yep. Toe-to-toe, who's going to... You know, at first it looked like Walker was going to get... he was going to be used to mop up the floor.
Yeah.
Like, boy, right out of Rocky in that regard.
Yes.
At least his nose didn't get broke.
Right.
But it finally ended up being, as you said, with them toe-to-toe, simply slugging it out.
Yeah, trading blows, one right after the other.
And they both collapse at pretty much the same moment. I believe the showman collapsed barely after Smith. Garibaldi called it a draw, which pretty much was. But that means, of course, that Gior remains champion. However, Gior's response, the showman's response, I think, to the fight says a lot.
You bet. And it was very Rocky-like. Even that part was. But it was done a lot better than Rocky was.
Yes.
It was so much better. I'm not even going to talk about the Rocky movie. That part of I think it was Rocky 4 where he fought the Russian.
Yes, it was.
Absolutely infuriated me at the end of that movie. So I'm not going to talk about it anymore.
Gosh. What, the can't we all get along thing?
It was that entire ending scene. Please don't get me started on that. We'll be here another hour.
Oh, what? Okay. Well, in that case, I'll just skip right on ahead to the Smith's departure, heading back out.
Well, no. Hold on. Now, you said Gior remains champion. That may be true. However, Smith has proven himself, and he has proven that humans are worthy.
That all comes out at. That's exactly what the jump ahead was for. Because he's met on the way out by the Mutari.
Right. And this is a moral victory to Smith.
It's more than a moral victory, and this gets back to the question that I said let's hold off on. Compare Smith's attitude and approach before the fight with his attitude and approach after the fight when the Mutado tells him he is welcome back. Humans, and not just him, but humans in general, are welcome in the Mutari. Look at Smith's reaction.
Oh, yeah. Well, he has definitely learned respect for the Mutari.
And I think for himself inside.
For the Mutai and the Mutado, but he still has some swagger left.
Oh, well, you've... Yeah, and clearly, so does Gior. That's part of being a fighter.
Yeah. But in that game, you got to have that in that game.
You've got to have a little of the swag.
I think you're pretty special. Yeah.
But you've also got to have that true respect, not just for your opponent, but for yourself. One of the things I learned in studying Kempo is you can't respect your opponent unless you can respect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You can fear your opponent, but you can't respect him in not in the true sense.
Right.
And that brings
Well,
up that question I kind of put off. So was his real victory the physical victory of the fight, or was the real victory what he had to face and overcome in himself?
yeah, I would say a little of both. However, he has now proved himself.
Uh-huh.
How will that stand? Will he get another shot?
And you just tapped one of the questions that I had. I asked it, though, talking to Anthea about this show in the past. It's not, will he get another shot, in the Earth boxing circuit.
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to even bother? Honestly,
that's
all he wanted before, huh?
That's all he knows.
That's all he knows, but after fighting in the Muay Thai, is he going to go back into the boxing circuit, or will he be back for another Muay Thai?
We'll never know.
No.
I'm sure he's going to want the rematch.
Yeah.
But we're not going to find out.
And he'll certainly be welcome. No, we're not going to find out. This was absolutely just a standalone. Completely a standalone episode. The main thing it served from the big picture of the story, and the only thing that really comes back with it at all, is closing out the background with Susan that started in Born to the Purple.
Yes. No, we do get some closure for Susan, and she will not be burdened with that anymore.
Right. As you had said in the notes, she still has healing to do, as does Smith. But in both cases, the physical and the emotional, respectively, the healing's begun.
I know. Smith goes to the Shaolin Temple and... All right, never mind. I'm not going to go there.
Oh, gosh.
At any rate, Susan seems healed, as you said, and she's got to come to terms with it yet, but she at least now has the tools to do that. She has forgiven her father. She has a better understanding. She's worked those things out, and that healing process can begin. And Smith needs to just go get patched up and
Yep. Very much so.
And his parting shot at Garibaldi was, once again, watch your back.
You got it.
And we'll find out that is kind of prophetic.
Well, if you go and look at some of Straczynski's notes, and here again I'm referencing to the Lurker's Guide, the way he puts it, there's a corker in TKO, but at the moment it's absolutely invisible. It's not a clue. It's not necessary for the story. It's just one of those things that after you've seen all the rest of this season's episodes, you will go, ouch, when you see it next.
Yeah.
So I think that's as close as to spoiling it as we're going to get tonight.
And that is the episode that is called TKO.
Yep. I think I've said everything that I've got to say on it. Anything for you to add, or have you covered?
No, it's a ship in the bottle episode. Stands very well on its own. And being an extension of the Ivanova story, bringing that to closure opens the door for her to be who she is as we go down the road.
Yep. And next week we've got another, basically the same sort of situation. It's a standalone episode, completely self-contained.
Yep.
But it answers some background questions as well.
Yeah.
And then the roller coaster starts.
Yes.
There will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more episodes. And it is one after another of, as far as I'm concerned, sheer brilliance.
Yeah. A lot of setup for what's coming.
Yeah. What begins after Grail, frankly, doesn't end until midway. I guess in one way you could say midway through season 4.
Mm-hmm.
In another way you could say it doesn't end until the end of season 4. And then season
Right.
5 is sort of a denouement of it.
Yes.
Well, my friend,
I think we've covered this pretty well.
amen to that.
Yeah.
And folks, as always, we certainly look forward to your feedback. Listen to the wonderful ISN news lady, who happens to be my wife, at the closing credits, and let us know what you think.
And I would also like to put in a plug for another podcast that I at least listen to, run by a good friend of mine,
Please.
named Hank Davis, and his partner Alex Cruz, who cover Agents
Oh,
of S.H.I.E.L.D.
I have gotten hooked on their show.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Isn't it neat?
It is neat. It is neat. I made an exception and started watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with season 1, mostly because of my son.
Mm-hmm.
And I started listening to their show at the end of season 1. And
Yeah.
it was really good.
It does.
Yeah. What's the
So
name
that's
of
the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fan podcast on the TPE network.
it? Is a great show, folks. Listen to it. I've gotten hooked on it myself.
They are available on iTunes. And speaking of iTunes, how about this segue?
Yes.
We have 5 5-star reviews on iTunes.
Awesome.
You know what? Wouldn't it be neat to get a few more of those?
I would love it. I'd love it.
It would really help us get the word out. And you don't have to use iTunes to leave a review. So, head over to iTunes if you feel we're worthy. Give us a 5-star reviews. We'll get up there in the ratings and the rankings a little bit, and continue
Hey,
to do shows.
I'll take 2 and 3-star reviews too, if they're deserved, just to learn and to improve our show.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great too. So that's all I've got.
All right. Well, until next time, no boom today.
Boom tomorrow.
Yep. There's always a boom tomorrow.
Yes, there is.
Good night, everybody.
So long.
Podcast terminated. Thank you for listening to the Babylon Project podcast. You can email Raul and Jim at the Babylon Project podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at the Babylon Project Podcast. On the internet, we are at babylonprojectpodcast.wordpress.com. To subscribe to the podcast, you can find us on iTunes, or you can subscribe to the RSS feed on the webpage.